It all started with a phone call, a simple, seemingly innocent request from my dad. "Come to Seattle for the holidays," he said, his voice softer than usual, almost pleading. He promised it would be a real family reunion, something we hadn't done in years. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I dropped everything, work deadlines, social plans, even a project I'd been pouring my heart into, and booked an outrageously expensive last-minute flight from Miami. The ticket alone cost more than I cared to admit, but I convinced myself it was worth it. After all, how often do you get to reconnect with family during the most wonderful time of the year? When I finally arrived at their house, exhausted from the 6-hour flight and dragging my suitcase through the snow, I expected warmth, a hug, maybe even a thank you. Instead, I got something entirely different. My dad opened the door, looked me straight in the eye, and said without missing a beat, "You're babysitting your sister's kids. We're going on vacation." Just like that, no preamble, no apology. Then came the kicker. My sister appeared holding her duffel bag, laughing as if this were some twisted joke. "Don't let the kids wipe their snot on you," she joked, and everyone erupted into laughter. It wasn't just awkward, it was humiliating. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a glorified nanny, someone whose sole purpose was to clean up their messes while they lived their best lives. That moment hit me harder than I expected, and I realized this trip wasn't about connection or celebration. It was about convenience for them. It was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment when they realized I wasn't their puppet anymore. When my dad opened the door and said, "You're babysitting," like it was a foregone conclusion, and my sister laughed about wiping snot on me, something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the exhaustion from the flight, or maybe it was years of resentment finally boiling over. Whatever it was, I didn't hesitate. I looked at them, all of them, and said, "You have no idea what you've done." Their laughter died instantly. My sister's grin faltered, and my dad's face turned ashen. I started laying it all out, piece by piece. First, I told them about the resort, the one they'd booked without even checking if I could actually stay with the kids. "Oh, that trip," I said coolly. "It's canceled. 3 days ago. Fully refunded to my credit card, the same one I used to pay for your groceries last month." My father blinked, confused. He hadn't noticed because he stopped opening his own statements years ago. All those bills, all those upgrades, he just signed his name and let me handle the rest. But that wasn't all. I dropped another bombshell. I'd stopped paying the mortgage 3 weeks earlier. No threats, no ultimatums, just silence. The bank would send a letter soon, and if they wanted to keep the house, they'd have to qualify on their own. Spoiler alert, they wouldn't. My sister's jaw dropped. She started stammering, trying to pull up the resort app on her phone. Her hands shook as she realized the booking was gone. My mom gasped, clutching her chest like she might faint. But I wasn't done yet. Then came the part that truly terrified them. I told them about Child Protective Services, CPS. 3 weeks ago, after our last Zoom call, I'd seen enough. The kids were left alone in the backyard without coats, one crying while my sister smoked on the porch and scrolled through her phone. I had screenshots, dates, times, everything. CPS had already opened a file, and now they were here for a home visit. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. My dad answered, and in walked Erin, a tall woman in her mid-40s with a clipboard and a badge. Erin introduced herself calmly, but the tension in the room was electric. My sister froze, clutching her useless plane tickets. I stepped aside and let Erin see for herself. The kitchen sink overflowed with dirty dishes. Empty wine bottles littered the counter. One of the kids had smeared peanut butter on the wall near the dining table. And when Erin asked to see the nursery, it got worse. The crib sheets hadn't been changed in days, and there was barely any food in the fridge. One child admitted they hadn't eaten since breakfast. Another showed her a small cut on their arm from playing with a broken toy, a sharp edge left unattended. Erin didn't raise her voice, but her tone was firm. She gave them a checklist of things that needed to be fixed immediately. If the situation didn't improve within 30 days, they risked losing custody temporarily or worse. My sister tried to argue, claiming she always left detailed instructions and would never neglect her children. But Erin wasn't convinced. She asked me if I had any messages confirming I'd agreed to babysit. I pulled out my phone and showed her my sister's last text. "Can you pick up some shampoo from Miami? The kind you bought me last time." Nothing about babysitting, nothing about consent. Just another free ride. As Erin finished her assessment, chaos erupted. My dad screamed, knocking over the coat rack in his fury. My mom begged, tears streaming down her face, pleading for me to undo what I'd done. But I stood firm. This wasn't revenge, it was justice. Years of being treated like an ATM, of having my generosity twisted into obligation, had led us here. And then came the final blow. My dad wasn't arrested that day, but someone, possibly me, had flagged irregularities in their government assistance claims. Fraud investigators arrived later that evening, asking questions about how funds meant for housing and childcare had been misused. My dad was visibly shaken, his voice trembling as he tried to explain away the discrepancies. It was clear he was under investigation, and the weight of it crushed him. That night, my mom showed up at my apartment, banging on the door at midnight. "Please," she sobbed, "you have to stop this. We'll lose everything." I stared at her, torn between anger and pity. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her facade, the desperation behind her usual calm demeanor. But I knew I couldn't cave. Not this time. Not ever again. The family I once knew was crumbling, and though it pained me to watch, I realized it was the only way forward for all of us. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just about cutting them off financially. It was about dismantling the system they'd built on my back. I started with the lawsuit, a formal complaint filed against my father for financial exploitation. Years of funneling money into their lives without any acknowledgement or gratitude had left me drained, both emotionally and financially. The documents were damning. Every transfer, every utility bill paid under my name, every credit card debt I'd covered for my sister, all meticulously recorded. I knew this would hit them where it hurt most, their pride. But I wasn't done yet. I called the bank that same day, requesting an immediate freeze on all accounts linked to my family. My father's pension fund, frozen. My sister's car loan, in default. Even the joint account I'd set up for groceries and utilities, gone. They'd have to navigate the chaos themselves now, without me as their safety net. I imagined their faces when the automated voice on the phone told them their transactions had been declined. For once, I felt a flicker of satisfaction watching the house of cards I'd propped up for years crumble beneath their feet. Then came the hardest part, testifying in court. A local investigation into welfare fraud had been quietly underway since I submitted evidence 3 months ago. That morning, I walked into the courthouse wearing a suit I hadn't worn since college, a subtle reminder to myself that I wasn't the same person who let them walk all over me anymore. As I took the stand, I saw my father sitting in the front row, his face red with anger. He glared at me as if I were betraying him, but I didn't flinch. I laid out the facts calmly, presenting screenshots of fraudulent claims, falsified income reports, and proof that government assistance meant for childcare had gone straight into vacations and luxury items instead. By the time I finished, even the judge looked disgusted. But the tension didn't end there. The following morning, my phone buzzed with an unknown number flashing across the screen. I hesitated before answering, then heard a low, distorted voice say, "You'll regret this. If you think you're safe, you're wrong." The line went dead before I could respond. My hands trembled as I stared at the glowing screen. Was it a prank? A threat? Or just another desperate attempt to intimidate me? Either way, it worked. I spent the rest of the day jumping at every sound, wondering if I'd pushed too far. The fallout hit like a storm. My father, once soft-spoken in his pleas for me to visit, now erupted into a rage that shook the house. He screamed at me, blaming me for everything. Our strained finances, their crumbling family dynamic, even the CPS investigation. "You think you're better than us?" he roared, his face red with fury. Before I could respond, he grabbed the coat rack and hurled it across the room, sending coats and scarves flying. The sound echoed through the hallway as if the walls themselves were trembling. Then came the ultimatum. "If this is how you want it, fine. You're dead to me." It wasn't just anger. It was desperation masked as control. My sister's reaction was quieter, but no less venomous. That night, after everyone had retreated to their corners, my phone buzzed incessantly. Her texts poured in like a floodgate opening. "How dare you do this to us? You'll regret ruining everything." And finally, the chilling threat. "If this family falls apart, it's on you." Each message felt like a knife twisting deeper, not because they hurt, but because they revealed her true nature. the same manipulative streak I'd seen countless times before. She wasn't asking for reconciliation. She was trying to regain power. But the real shock came days later, late one evening in my new apartment. I heard a faint scraping sound outside my door, a metallic clink followed by silence. My heart raced as I approached the peephole, but all I saw was an empty hallway. When I called the police, they arrived quickly, dusting for fingerprints and inspecting the lock. Someone had tried, and failed, to pick it. The officers exchanged glances, clearly uneasy. "This isn't amateur work," one of them muttered. After further investigation, they discovered that someone close to my family had hired a local thug to intimidate me. A neighbor's security camera caught a shadowy figure lingering near my building earlier that day. The evidence pointed to my sister's boyfriend, a man known for his temper and shady connections. The silence in my new apartment was a luxury I'd never known before. Every morning, I woke up to the soft hum of the city outside my window. No frantic texts from my sister asking for money. No guilt trips from my dad about family loyalty. It was just me, alone but free. For the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling like someone else's lifeline was wrapped around my neck. But peace, as it turns out, isn't always permanent. One crisp morning, as I sipped coffee by the kitchen counter, an envelope slid under my door. No return address, just my name scrawled in handwriting I recognized instantly, my mom's. Inside was a small check and a note. "We're doing all we can." My hands trembled as I read it. Was this genuine remorse or another attempt to manipulate? I didn't cash the check right away. Instead, I tucked it into a drawer, unsure if their efforts would last beyond this fleeting gesture. Then came the letter that truly shook me. Days later, a handwritten note arrived from my sister. Her words were raw, unfiltered. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but you saved me. I'm trying to fix things, for myself, for the kids." She enclosed a photo of her standing in front of a modest apartment building, holding keys. The image hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't the same woman who once laughed at my expense or treated me like a safety net. Something had shifted, not because of me, but perhaps because she finally saw what life looked like without one. Though I didn't respond immediately, I kept the letter close. Forgiveness felt too far away, but distance seemed manageable, for now. The condo was everything I'd dreamed of, a quiet sanctuary perched on the 10th floor, with sleek furniture and wide windows that let in the pale Seattle light. It smelled faintly of fresh paint when I moved in, but over time, it began to feel like home. For the first time in years, I woke up without the crushing weight of someone else's problems pressing down on me. No more frantic phone calls from my sister begging for rent money or texts from my dad guilt-tripping me about family loyalty. Just silence, pure, unbroken silence. And it was glorious. But even in this newfound peace, I couldn't shake the lingering question, had they really changed? A part of me wanted to believe it was possible, that maybe, just maybe, my actions had forced them to confront their own failures. And then, one crisp morning 3 months later, an email arrived from my sister. The subject line read simply, "Thank you." I hesitated before opening it, half expecting another plea or accusation. Instead, I found a photo attached, a bright, cheerful image of her kids standing in front of a modest apartment building, holding keys. Their smiles were genuine, free of the tension that once shadowed their eyes. She wrote only a few lines. "We're settling into our new place. It's small, but it's ours. Thank you for making us see what we couldn't or wouldn't before." I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure how to feel. Relief? Skepticism? Maybe both. Her words felt sincere, but trust isn't something easily rebuilt, especially after years of manipulation and betrayal. Still, I appreciated the gesture, the acknowledgement that boundaries, though painful, were necessary. That night, as I sat by the window watching snowflakes drift lazily through the city lights, I realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't the goal. Peace was. And if distance was what it took to achieve that, then so be it. As for my father, there was nothing, not a word, not even a whisper. Part of me wondered if he'd ever come around, or if he'd spend the rest of his life stewing in resentment. My mother occasionally sent notes, always brief, always tinged with regret. But she never asked me to reconsider. She seemed to understand, finally, that some wounds heal best when left alone. In the end, I didn't have answers, only hope. Hope that my sister would keep moving forward, that my mom would find strength in vulnerability, and that my dad, well, perhaps some people are beyond changing. What I didn't know was this. I had reclaimed my life, piece by piece, and built something untouchable. For now, that was enough. This story isn't just about me. It's about the power of saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. For years, I let my family treat me like an endless resource, a safety net they could stretch over and over without consequence. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a solution, a way to fix their problems without ever having to face them. But what they didn't realize was that every time I gave in, I lost a piece of myself. It wasn't until I hit rock bottom, standing in that cold Seattle apartment with my suitcase still half unpacked, that I understood something profound. Boundaries aren't cruel, they're necessary. Without them, we become invisible, not just to others but to ourselves. The hardest part wasn't cutting ties. It was realizing how deeply entrenched their expectations had become. My dad's guilt trips, my sister's endless requests, my mom's quiet complicity, they all worked together to keep me trapped in a cycle of obligation. Breaking free required more than anger, it required precision. Every step I took, from canceling the resort reservation to reporting them for welfare fraud, was calculated, deliberate. I wasn't acting out of revenge. I was reclaiming my life. And though it felt like tearing down walls at first, I now see it as building bridges to a future where I'm no longer defined by what I can give, but by who I am. What surprised me most was how my actions forced them to confront their own failures. When CPS arrived, when the bank letters came, when the car got repossessed, they couldn't ignore reality anymore. My sister, once so quick to laugh at my expense, started working part-time at a daycare center. She sent me photos of her kids smiling in a small but clean apartment, proof that she was finally learning to stand on her own 2 feet. Even my mom, who once begged me to undo everything, began sending small checks, not because she thought it would fix things, but because she wanted to try. As for my dad, well, silence speaks volumes. He may never change, but his absence taught me something invaluable. Some people will only respect you when you stop letting them take advantage of you. The lesson here is simple yet profound. Freedom doesn't come from pleasing others. It comes from honoring yourself. Standing up to your family, even the people you love most, is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. But it's also one of the most liberating. By setting boundaries, I didn't just save myself. I gave my family a chance to grow, too. Maybe they'll fail again. Maybe they won't. But for the first time, they're living with the weight of their choices instead of dumping it on someone else. And that, more than anything, is worth celebrating. This story isn't just about me. It's about the power of saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. For years, I let my family treat me like an endless resource, a safety net they could stretch over and over without consequence. They didn't see me as a person. They saw me as a solution, a way to fix their problems without ever having to face them. But what they didn't realize was that every time I gave in, I lost a piece of myself. It wasn't until I hit rock bottom, standing in that cold Seattle apartment with my suitcase still half unpacked, that I understood something profound. Boundaries aren't cruel, they're necessary. Without them, we become invisible, not just to others but to ourselves. The hardest part wasn't cutting ties. It was realizing how deeply entrenched their expectations had become. My dad's guilt trips, my sister's endless requests, my mom's quiet complicity, they all worked together to keep me trapped in a cycle of obligation. Breaking free required more than anger, it required precision. Every step I took, from canceling the resort reservation to reporting them for welfare fraud, was calculated, deliberate. I wasn't acting out of revenge. I was reclaiming my life. And though it felt like tearing down walls at first, I now see it as building bridges to a future where I'm no longer defined by what I can give, but by who I am. What surprised me most was how my actions forced them to confront their own failures. When CPS arrived, when the bank letters came, when the car got repossessed, they couldn't ignore reality anymore. My sister, once so quick to laugh at my expense, started working